Welcome to this morning's press conference, which I lead off wearing two hats this morning. Firstly, as a very disturbed citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, and secondly, as an office holder and as the holder of the office of Minister of National Security. Today, it is with somewhat of a heavy heart that I've called this press conference this morning, but as someone who's thrust with the responsibility and the duty to protect the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and to lead the charge of the government utilizing the arms of national security to create a safer Trinidad and Tobago. Citizens, I'd like to start at the outset by showing two news clips, two videos, to take our minds back to what we now are discovering more and more was a very dark period in Trinidad and Tobago's history. A time where, as I will take you through this morning, that should concern all of us, law-abiding citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. A time where our rights were being infringed, our rights to privacy, our rights to be able to go about our daily duties and our daily lives without interference unnecessarily and in an intrusive manner by the arms of the state. But most importantly, a complete abuse of your right to privacy. And for the vast majority of us citizens at this time, we were unaware of what was taking place and the abuse that was taking place by certain apparatus of the state and the use of state assets to get behind exactly what it is that we, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, were doing on a daily basis, minute by minute. So I'd ask that we can focus our attention on the television screen here, and I'll play us back to what the media first alerted us to back in 2014, 2015.
If you've answered a call from this number in the last few months, you've probably been invited to have a conversation with the Prime Minister. It is part of the People's Partnership 2015 general election campaign. According to Jay, who responded to a question we posted on Facebook, the message reads something like this, quote, "This is your Honourable Prime Minister, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, inviting you to a conversation with me about the upcoming elections. I will call you back at 8 p.m. End quote. But some who received the call are skeptical about how the campaign team gained access to their mobile phone numbers. Melissa tells us she is confused since she does not recall registering anywhere that may have allowed access to her phone number. Stacey Ann told us her son got the call and asked where are they getting the numbers from. Carol said she received a call on her home phone, which she says is unlisted. Several people from the CNC3 newsroom also received the automated call. So how are they getting your numbers? We called the Elections and Boundaries Commission. Communications Manager Dominic Hines told us the EBC does not provide personal information except to law enforcement for investigative purposes, but that request must come in writing. If the numbers were provided by the mobile telecommunications providers, it could arguably be a breach of the Interception of Communications Act, but it would also be a breach of the concessions issued by the Telecommunications Authority to all mobile operators. Clause 22 says, the concessionaire shall give the user control of whether the user's assigned number is published and shall keep such information confidential except where disclosure of user information is otherwise provided for. Several calls to the UNC campaign manager Rodney Charles went unanswered this afternoon. However, someone with knowledge of how the system works told CNC3 that the numbers are generated from a series of databases. They include internal party information, people who register on the website camlet2015.tt, and through social media pages linked to the parties of the coalition. The person denied that information from government ministries was used or that telecoms providers' databases were involved. We tried calling the number today, but it did not seem active.
That was the first warning that we got back in 2014, 2015. Can you play the second video?
Christopher Wylie is said to be ready to testify before a joint select committee to reveal just what parts Cambridge Analytica and SCL.
Okay. Wasn't supposed to be that video. There's a second video that was also surfaced at the time just before the general elections of 2015, in the last general elections. People of Trinidad and Tobago, that was our first warning as citizens that something was amiss. And when the media asked the question of the UNC at that time, you heard very clearly in that media report an outright denial that any of the state's apparatus were being used to get through to individuals and to cross that line and to intrude into our daily lives. Subsequent to that, in international media, we had the news story of Cambridge Analytica break within the last couple of years. And at the forefront, as a whistleblower and as a person testifying, both before the British Parliament as well as the US Congress, was a gentleman, Christopher Wylie. Again, at the time when certain comments were made about Trinidad and Tobago, which should have concerned us Trinidad and Tobago citizens, there was a blanket denial by the then government in power during the time of 2010 to 2015. And there was a denial by the leader of the opposition and others in the UNC that they had ever interfaced with Cambridge Analytica. However, within the last few weeks, for the first time, outside of parliamentary privilege, as well as outside of congressional privilege that exists in the United States of America Congress, Christopher Wylie has published his chronicle and has published in his own words a book titled Mind F squiggly CK asterisk CK, Cambridge Analytica and the plot to break America. What we know now as global citizens is that the US, their allegations that both the Brexit vote in the United Kingdom as well as the United States presidential elections were influenced via the use of data mining, the use of social media, and also the interference of Russian personnel. What we did not know at the time was how intricately involved our small twin island state of Trinidad and Tobago was in this diabolical plan. That we, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, under the hands of the United National Congress, were the international guinea pig for this diabolical plan. And Christopher Wylie has told us that now in his book, and there are excerpts of the book that I'd like to refer the public of Trinidad and Tobago to today. Because as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, it has me extremely concerned. And as a Minister of National Security, as I'll come to in a short while, who is charged with the responsibility of protecting the safety and security of us citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, it has me even more concerned, and I intend to deal with it. Mr. Wylie says in his book, next, we needed a case study, a location where we could scale to a nation-state level to show potential military clients what we were capable of doing. Trinidad and Tobago, with 1.3 million people, fit the bill perfectly. It was an island nation, self-contained, yet with a variety of cultures. There was an Afro-Caribbean population, an Indo-Caribbean population, and a smattering of white people, creating an interesting cultural tension to explore. It was an ideal laboratory That is what we are described as, an ideal laboratory in which to run our experiments at scale. The Trinidad Ministry of National Security wanted to know whether it was possible to use data to identify Trinidadians who were more likely to commit crimes, and beyond that, whether it was possible to predict when and how they might do it. SCL, which is the original company, Strategic Communications Laboratories, which was a British company, had a long history of operating throughout the various micronations of the Caribbean. After it helped selected politicians get into power, the firm would often recoup its investment in government contracts. At SCL, we started referring to this as the Minority Report Project. But the truth was, the Trinidadian government wasn't interested only in reducing crime. This is around the 2013 period. I repeat, the truth was the Trinidadian government wasn't interested only in reducing crime. They knew that if we built a tool to forecast behavior, they could use it in elections. They weren't just focused on future criminals. They also wanted to zero in on future political supporters. The team anticipated vast swaths of data because senior Trinidad government contacts were offering SCL access to unredacted, de-anonymized census in the developing world. Privacy is a concern usually reserved for the rich. Essentially, the Trinidadian government was violating the privacy of all its citizens in one swoop. Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, that one sentence should concern and strike at the heart of every law-abiding citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, where Mr. Wylie, who was at the center of carrying out this plan of invasion of privacy, has said now in his book, in his own words, that essentially the Trinidadian government was violating the privacy of all its citizens in one swoop. SCL needed to explore using the internet to collect relevant data, to create a tool that would be cross-culturally and cross-nationally applicable. So SCL's next step was to send people on the ground to Caribbean telecom companies to ask if SCL could tap into their data fire hose in real time. To my surprise, this was possible. What this means is that they were given access to the telecommunications apparatus in Trinidad and Tobago to tap in. And he goes on to describe what that means for you and me, every user of the internet, whether it be on your tablet, your cellular phone, your smartphones, your computers at home, or wherever you are, and exactly what access they were given. He continues, working with a set of contractors, SCL was able to tap into the telecom fire hose, pick an IP address, and then sit and watch what a person in Trinidad was browsing on the internet at that very moment. Not surprisingly, it was a lot of porn. People were browsing everything imaginable, including the culturally specific quote-unquote Trini porn. I can remember sitting around the computer one evening and watching as someone toggled between looking up plantain recipes and watching porn, all while Nix, who was the CEO of Cambridge Analytica, laughed at them. It was a revoltingly giddy laugh, almost infantile. He looked up the IP address and then opened up Google Maps satellite view to see the neighborhood this person lived in. Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, lest you don't understand what Christopher Wylie has just told us, the UNC government, when in power, gave access to this firm, SCL, Strategic Communications Laboratory, through our telecommunications servers, for them to be able to sit in computer labs wherever they were located in the world and to tap in to see on your smartphone, on your computer, on your tablet, anywhere you had access to the internet, any of us as individuals, what exactly we were doing at any given point in time. What that means is, for example, you're conducting banking transactions on your smartphone, they can see your PIN. You're surfing the internet, you're doing research, or doing something that maybe you should not be doing. They now have direct access to not only your historical information, but also on-time, real-time access to what you are doing. That gave the UNC, who continue to have this, the access to blackmail, extort persons who are compromised by their browsing history. He goes on to tell us how Nix preyed upon the colonial fetishes and insecurities of men who ran the nations of empire. Once he gained their trust, he would then broker deals between ministers who were looking for validation and women and businessmen who were looking to exploit corrupt opportunities and travel unnoticed. He said, and this again is critical, this is Christopher Wylie, we were spying, pure and simple, with cover from Trinidadian leaders. We were spying, pure and simple, with cover from Trinidadian leaders. The leadership at the time was the UNC People's Partnership government. It felt bizarre, unreal to be observing what people were watching on a tiny faraway island, somehow more like we were playing a video game than intruding on the private lives of actual people. Even today, thinking back on it, Trinidad seems more like a dream than something we actually did. But we did do it. In the Trinidad project was the first time I got sucked into a situation that was grossly unethical, and frankly, it triggered in me a state of denial. As I watched those live streams, I didn't allow myself to actually picture the human prey, people who had no idea that their private behavior was delighting sinister audiences, half a world away. The Trinidad project was my first taste of this new wave of digital colonialism. We arrived unannounced with our superior technology and moral disregard, no better than the king's armies, except this time, unlike the conquerors of old, we were completely invisible. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the words of Christopher Wylie as he describes what it is that we, the population, were subject to. That we, Trinidad and Tobago, were the first guinea pig. That we, the Trinidad and Tobago citizens, were one of the original experiments, the guinea pig for SCL, which went on to become Cambridge Analytica. Government officials, ministries, state entities were used to exploit and access our personal and private data. Deep state agents were used for a political party's purpose of winning an election. The frightening thing is, being used as guinea pigs, this then ties directly in, according to Christopher Wylie, to the United States of America elections, and one person that we should all know now, Mr. Steve Bannon. And he goes on at page 60 to say, on the surface, Bannon seemed utterly predictable. Another old straight white guy, but he spoke with a certain wokeness I hadn't expected at all. In fact, I quickly decided he was kind of cool. As we started trading ideas on measuring culture, I offered to show him some of our data. I opened a Tableau workbook and called up a map of Trinidad. So this is Christopher Wylie now with Steve Bannon, who we now know influenced the US elections using Trinidad and what they were doing in Trinidad and Tobago and had done in Trinidad and Tobago, real time now in a US election as an example. He called up a map of Trinidad. He says, I clicked a button and a layer of neon yellow dots began to populate the map. Quote, those are real people, by the way, unquote, I said. Quote, they're the ones we have demographic data on, gender, age, ethnicity, unquote. I clicked again and more dots appeared. Quote, and now we are adding it online, footprinting like internet browsing, unquote. I clicked again, quote, and here records with census information and now social media profiles. I continued to add layers and he leaned in. The map lit up more and more with little clusters of dots growing outward until after the final click, the map was dazzling in a multitude of colors. He asked who had paid for it, but I told him I couldn't say. As I started to outline the types of research into social media networks that DARPA was funding, he asked if something similar could be carried out in America. And Wylie said, I don't see why not. What that is describing, people, is real time after a UNC government had provided this information, our information, they were still able to click on their computers and to pull up everyone who is using our telecommunication system in Trinidad and to then look and see what it is all of us were doing. The worst type of incursion into privacy. And it is not for a recognized purpose such as national security. It was not being done to protect us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. It was for very sinister purposes. And this is not me, Stuart Young, the Minister of National Security and a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, telling you this. This is the person who did it. In his book, Christopher Wylie, telling us and warning us as to what it is that happened. He then goes on to describe how this technique is used and why. If we can measure or infer certain traits in individuals using personal data and then use those same traits to describe a culture, we can chart a distribution, creating an approximate metric for that culture. This framework made it possible for us to propose how we could use personal data found on social media in click streams or from data vendors to identify, for example, the most extroverted Italian people are, who they are, the type of behavior, their patterns of behavior. The goal in hacking is to find a weak point in the system and then exploit that vulnerability. In psychological warfare, the weak points are flaws in how people think. If you're trying to hack a person's mind, you need to identify the cognitive biases and then exploit them. If you walk up to a random person on the street and ask, are you happy? The chances are high that she will say yes. If, however, you walk up to that same person and first ask, have you gained weight in the last few years? Or are any people from your high school more successful than you? And then ask, are you happy? That same person will be less inclined to answer yes. The incursion into our privacy was with a specific purpose. What they wanted to know is about every single one of you sitting in this room, every single one of you listening and looking on, through permission granted to this firm hired by the UNC. They wanted to know about each and every one of us and our most personal secrets, our most personal details, what it is we do on a daily basis on our smartphones and our tablets. Again, this is not me saying this. This is the person who did it himself. When I got to the Trinidad project, I could see Bannon nodding his head as I described the idea of replicating society in silico. I also got Bob Mercer's attention because as an engineer, he was especially interested in this part. Harvesting social media data to profile users with an algorithm was just the beginning. Once their behavioral attributes were inferred, simulations could be run to map out how they would communicate and interact with one another at a scale. This was not just looking at your browsing and your social media history. This was getting into your personal space, understanding how you operate, what time you log on to your phone, what it is you surf, what it is you're interested in, what it is you're doing on a daily basis, any personal transactions you're conducting on your smartphone. This, ladies and gentlemen, fellow citizens, is what was going on with us, unknown to us, the citizens. He goes on to talk about how it was then turned into and what it became. This was the utmost breach in our privacy. What they did is they permitted SCL to see what you were browsing and to build a database on every single one of us. The UNC abused its power as the government of the day to get into the private data of us individuals for manipulative purposes. This went on to be used in the United States of America by Steve Bannon to influence a US presidential election. I have described to you, in the words of Christopher Wylie, how the science worked and what it was used to do. It gets even more frightening as the Russians get involved next. And now we hear about the birth of Cambridge Analytica with an individual called Kogan. Kogan was someone, a Russian individual, who was lecturing at the British University, Cambridge. And Wylie goes on to describe how Christopher Nix, the CEO of what then became Cambridge Analytica, and himself met with Kogan, who was a scientist looking at behavioral patterns. He's describing it. At first, I had no idea about Kogan's background, as he spoke English with a perfect American accent, albeit with an exaggerated prosody. I later learned he was born in Moldavian SSR during the final years of the Soviet Union and spent part of his childhood in Moscow. Clicker then introduced me to Kogan, as he knew the work he was doing in his lab at Cambridge could be extremely useful for SCL, but knowing Nix's preferred style of venue, Clicker decided that the introduction should happen over wine. Facebook knows more about you than any other person in your life, even your wife, Kogan told us. SCL had just secured from Mercer and was in the process of setting up a new American entity. Before Nix was to let Kogan near his new prize project in America, he would have to prove himself in the Caribbean first. At the time, in early 2014, Kogan was working with researchers based at St. Petersburg State University on a psychological profiling project funded by the Russian state through a public research grant. Kogan advised a team in St. Petersburg that was pulling swaths of social media profile data and using it to analyze online trolling behavior. Given that this Russian social media focused on maladaptive and antisocial traits, SCL thought it could be applied to the Trinidad project. This is in 2014, early 2014. As Ministry of National Security staff, they were interested in experimenting with predictive modeling of Trinidadian citizens' propensity to commit crimes. In an email to Trinidad Security Ministry and its National Security Council about criminal psychographic profiling via dated intercepts, one SCL staffer said that, quote, we may want to get to either loop in or find out a bit more about the interesting work Alex Kogan has been doing for the Russians and see how or if it applies, unquote. Kogan eventually signed up to assist SCL on the Trinidadian project, where he offered advice on how to model a set of psychological constructs that past research had identified as related to antisocial or deviant behavior. Kogan wanted data in exchange for helping to plan the project, and he started discussions with SCL about accessing its data set of 1.3 million Trinidadians for his own research. What I liked about Kogan was that he wanted to work fast and to get stuff done, which was not common for professors accustomed to the glacial pace of academic life, and he came across as honest, ambitious, and upfront, if a little bit naive in his excitement for ideas and intellectual ambition. Kogan started on Trinidad, but he was far more intrigued by SCL's work in the United States. He told me that if he was brought onto the American job, he could work with his team at the Psychometric Center to fill gaps in the variables and data categories in order to create more reliable models. He started asking to access some of our data sets to see what might be missing in the training set, which is the sample data one uses to train a model to identify patterns. So there you have it from Christopher Wylie, how we, the guinea pig of Trinidad and Tobago, we, the 1.3 million citizens, decided by a political party to become the global guinea pig for what became Cambridge Analytica, and they gave access to these individuals to be able to see what each and every one of you citizens of Trinidad and Tobago were doing once you accessed the internet. And there is the Russian involvement. We all know what went on thereafter with Brexit in the United Kingdom, and then a US presidential election, and the investigations that took place. There's another company that then got involved. That is Aggregate IQ, which was a Canadian company. And what Wylie says about AIQ is, AIQ's headquarters was a brick building on Pandora Avenue, only a block from the ocean in Victoria on Vancouver Island. SCL and CA employees loved to visit the office. It was scenic, breezy, and relaxed compared with the frantic pace of London. As AIQ grew, the firm recruited a fantastic and diverse team of engineers to work on SCL projects. AIQ's Trinidad contract with SCL included building infrastructure for Facebook data harvesting, clickstream data, ISP logs, and the reconciliation of IPs and user agents to home addresses, which would help de-anonymize internet browsing data. What that language means is they didn't want just your IP address. They wanted to know who is Shane Superville, what it is that you're doing, who is Nika Personal, what it is you're doing, who it is looking on the other side of this television here today or listening wherever you are, whatever your name is, Stuart Young, to see what it is you're doing on your smartphone, your tablet, your computer, and to have access real time. So as soon as you click and you go on and you're browsing, this is what they were doing, and then selling this all over the world to the Americans, to the Russians. Why would anyone breach our rights to privacy? Nowhere in here was it for any of our protection from a national security point of view. And then Wylie, towards the end and his conclusions, talks about if he told the whole truth behind Cambridge Analytica, he risked angering Russians, hackers, WikiLeaks, and a host of others who'd show no compunction about breaking laws in Africa, the Caribbean, Europe, and beyond. Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, members of the media, those are just a couple of the excerpts that I've read, but what I think are the important ones to highlight. These are not the words of me, the individual, but it's me reading what someone who is at the heart of this operation is telling the world via his book. He did, using our data, our personal data here in Trinidad and Tobago. What you've heard there, and if you begin to imagine how widespread and how wide-reaching this is beyond just a social media profile. It is the UNC government having given access of all of our personal data, what we believe our rights to privacy, completely breached, infringed, abused by these individuals for one purpose, their political expediency and to win elections. We've heard denials, in fact, in the news media release that we saw from 2014, 2015, you heard the UNC deny. But where it falls down is, at that time, around the general elections of 2015, our hands were able to get onto the minutes of the campaign team of the UNC, the campaign and national executive coordination meeting of Tuesday, the 3rd of June, 2014, at the UNC headquarters, Rienzi Complex, Couva. And I'll provide copies of this afterwards to you, the members of the media. The attendees at the time were, and I'll call the names, Rodney Charles, Dave Tanku, Shem Baldeo Singh, Khadija Amin, Andy Ali, Roger Ramcharita, Richard Ahmad, Arun Ramnanan. Excuse was a Mr. Steve Arman. The meeting commenced at 5 p.m. They reviewed and confirmed the minutes of the meeting a few days before, of the 27th of May 2014. And they discussed the following matters, including at point number 2, which is the most disturbing. And this is confirmation and proof of the UNC's involvement. The UNC is not the government. Just like right now, the PNM party is not the government. elected members form the government, but there must be a line drawn. But these are the UNC minutes of a meeting of their campaign team in June 2014, their National Executive Coordination meeting minutes of Rodney Charles, Dave Tanku, Shem Baldev Singh and Tanku were in the office of the Prime Minister as advisors. Rodney Charles likes to tell us how he was in the UN as this country's ambassador, but this is saying he was here present at Rienzi Complex in June 2014. Khadija Amin, a senator, current senator of the UNC, Andy Ali, Roger Ramcharita, Richard Ahmad, and Arun Ramnanan. Data collection, first bullet point, tapping into state agencies to build a voter file, using existing data capture initiatives already existing. What is a political party tapping into a state agency to get your information and my information? Why would a political party be looking to do that? And they then say, Dave Tanku is to obtain 2010 TSTT files historical. Andy Ali, the WASA files. Dave Tanku, TNTech and TT Post, Ministry of the People and Social Development. The data at the Ministry of the People and Social Development would be food card data, grants data, disability grants, social grants. Anyone whose information is there, you have a political party saying, Tanku, go and get that data. Tanku was not a government minister. He was the right hand of the Prime Minister at the time, Kamala Prasad Bisesa. Steve Armand to be approached on the gate file. All of you young people who at the time were studying and you wanted to know how they got access to your data, they being the UNC, this is the answer. San Fernando West, Arun. Why target San Fernando West? This is minutes of a meeting of the UNC political party in June 2014. Marry that now to what Christopher Wylie has said in his book as to what it is he was doing and the access to information that he had. This is the UNC. This is not the state. Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, having been exposed to this information, I want to first of all put on record that when this first came to our attention, long before this book and this story started to break internationally, the Attorney General was tasked with the responsibility of touching base with the international investigators who were looking into this whole Cambridge Analytica. Many of you would have seen the movie by now, The Great Hack. We featured there as well. The Attorney General, at the time this broke, over a year and a half ago, as he's now said, reached out to the FBI, the US State Department of Justice, the National Crime Agency in the United Kingdom. He, along with other attorney generals and law enforcement personnel, met in other jurisdictions across the globe to look at this Cambridge Analytica. He's had discussions through the state's attorneys in the UK, Mr. Christopher Wylie's attorneys. It is something that we were pursuing at the time. Now that Mr. Wylie has come out in the open with his book, and we, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, feature so prominently in what was an abuse of our rights to privacy and the worst possible type of intrusion. And he, Mr. Wylie, is saying by government personnel at the time, and we marry that with what the UNC have recorded for time immemorial in their minutes of their campaign team and their national executive minutes of the 3rd of June 2014. As the Minister of National Security, I have serious concerns. And today, I'm letting the population know that I will be asking for the launch of criminal investigations into what has taken place. And parallel to that, along with the Office of the Attorney General, I will be seeking international recourse, meaning through the Attorney General's office, we will make official requests for information, working along with the authorities We are also considering the appointment of a special prosecutor and investigator to look into this, because this is extremely serious. And what is even more frightening is I have reason to believe this continues. I have reason to believe that the UNC continue to pursue this type of activity under our very noses. It continues to happen. The Attorney General, as I said, has already reached out. We cannot say very much about that because there were international criminal investigations taking place. But now that Mr. Wylie has come out and spoken, you've heard what the Attorney General has carefully been telling us over the past 10 days. In looking at it and in questioning whether there is any breach, any criminal offense, I say immediately the answer is yes. And I draw your attention to the Interception of Communications Act, Chapter 1508, and I remind you, the population, what this act is designed to do. It is an act to provide for and about the interception of communications, the acquisition and disclosure of data relating to communications. This is a classic example of someone who is unauthorized acquiring and disclosing our data. The acquisition of the means by which electronic data protected by encryption or passwords may be decrypted or accessed, and other related matters. I draw your attention. Under this act, there are only 3 authorized officers in law who are allowed to intercept communications. What was going on was an interception of our communications, because nobody gave anyone permission to be seeing what you're doing at any given point in time in your own private space when you're on the internet and browsing. The 3 authorized officers are the Chief of Defense Staff, the Commissioner of Police, or the Director of Strategic Services Agency. Communications includes anything comprising speech, music, sounds, visual images, or data of any description, or signals between persons, between a person and a thing, or between things, or for the actuation or control of any apparatus. The next definition, intercept. What does intercept mean? In relation to communication, it means listening to, monitoring, viewing, reading, or recording. Viewing, reading, or recording. Mr. Wylie has described in the clearest possible terms that is what they were doing. They were viewing what you were looking at. They were recording what you were looking at. And they were reading what was going on your smart devices. By any means, such as a communication and its passage over a telephone communications network. That is the way all of you log on to the internet in Trinidad and Tobago, via Digicel and via B-Mobile and TSTT. That is the only way. Those are 2 of the service providers that provide us on our smartphones. There are others. These are the telecommunication servers. And it appears as though what happened at that time is a political party used state agencies to give these foreigners access to these providers for them to be able to see via your IP addresses what you were doing, what you were doing, what you were doing, what you were browsing. Every single citizen of Trinidad and Tobago on the network. And the minister referred to in this act as the minister to whom responsibility for national security. I invite you, the population, to look at the Interception of Communications Act, and in particular, Section 6 of the Act. Except as Section 6.1 says, except as provided in this section, a person who intentionally intercepts a communication in the course of its transmission by means of a telecommunication network commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $500,000 and to imprisonment for 7 years. That was breached. And this is what the criminal investigation and the investigation charged by the Ministry of National Security and the Office of the Attorney General will be looking into. That section, Section 6, was breached, and that in itself is a criminal offense. Section 7 of the Act goes on to talk of possession of interception devices and how it can be done. So, ladies and gentlemen, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, this is a most disturbing development and unfortunately confirmation of something that we feared. confirmation by the person who is key and critical in doing it. You've heard the language that Mr. Wylie has used, talked about unethical behavior, about how they were able in far off places to just click on your IP address, your phone's IP address, pull it up. You're just a dot to them. But when they click on that dot, they can see everything that you're seeing on the face, on the screen. And that is what was taking place. In a nutshell, Trinidad and Tobago was an epicenter of a spying mechanism, a machinery using tools to attack our democracy and to abuse our citizens. And this is something that we, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, are not taking lightly. Now, what I can give you the assurance of here today, without fear of contradiction, is this government has not done this. This government has not participated in anything like this, and we will not do so. I accept that there are instances for national security that there may be a need to know what persons are doing, but that is what the Act governs, the Interception of Communications Act. That's for the Commissioner of Police, the Director of the SSA, or the Chief of Defense Staff. And there is a level of accountability, because once they do it, they must notify the Minister of National Security. That's set out in the Act. So as the Minister of National Security, I am notified. I don't know who it is they're going after. They use codes and acronyms. But every time it is utilized, I receive a report in accordance with the law within 96 hours that an interception has been commenced. There is nowhere in the records of national security that show 1.3 million people and what you were doing and browsing on your smartphones and your other devices were being intercepted legally, because it was all illegal. There is one other disturbing trend that I add to this, because this, we believe, continues to be going on. This, we believe, the data continues to be in their possession, and the access to data. Persons have been reporting to us that they continue to get messages, they continue to get calls by the UNC government. There's one other further piece of information I've come here today to provide to you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, that has me extremely concerned. I've mentioned it in the last few weeks. I'm putting down yet another marker here today as more information has come to me. You've seen the resurgence of Mr. Anil Roberts. You will recall the allegations of who Mr. Anil Roberts was alleged to have been associated with, the criminal elements on the East-West corridor. I am cautioning that it appears as though there is a plan to utilize the criminal elements in our society to influence the outcome of voting in the local government election, and that resurgence is no coincidence. You marry that with the multi-pronged approach of what we're seeing here and the use of social media, the use of technology, the incursion, destruction, and abuse of your rights to privacy. And every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago has a right to be concerned. So, ladies and gentlemen, I conclude by saying, having taken the time to point these concerns out to you, we, the government, will be asking for the commencement of a criminal investigation. We will also utilize the Office of the Attorney General to carry out that investigation internationally. We will be seeking the appointment of a special investigator prosecutor to get to the bottom of this, to find out who committed criminal acts, what laws were breached, and most importantly, to put an end to this. It is important that we find out how this was perpetrated upon us and to put an immediate end to it. Unfortunately, this is what happened in 2014, 2015, and commenced in 2013 under the then government. And you're seeing that the heart, the brain, the genesis of it comes out of a campaign team, a national executive coordination meeting at the UNC headquarters, Rienzi complex. This is just confirmation, partial confirmation of who is behind it. I thank you all very much for your attention. I assure you that there was an absolute need to draw this to your attention, because it has us extremely concerned from the highest level of the government down. And it is not something we will sit by idly and allow to take place. Second. Okay, I'm told that right now they have the second video ready and up and running. So we'll end with the second video and then I'll entertain some questions. Thank you.
And on behalf of who? Sorry? I'm calling on behalf of the Prime Minister. Okay, go ahead. Okay, and what do you believe is the most important issue facing your constituency?
An unanswered question from the 2015 general election now points to a possible data breach.
Do you mind if I just ask how you got my number?
It was a question many who were contacted by the Vote Kamla campaign in 2015 queried. But the minutes of a UNC campaign team and national executive coordination meeting may provide some answers. 10 items were listed arising out of the meeting held on Tuesday, the 4th of June 2014. Among the 8 people in attendance, they discussed the issue of data collection, specifically tapping into state agencies to build a voter file using what it called existing data capture initiatives. It does not say what those methods are or how the group intended to access the data, but the state agencies identified are TSTT, WASA, TNTech, TT Post, the Ministry of the People and Social Development, GATE, and also a file in San Fernando West, a seat considered marginal. If these files were accessed by the UNC, which was in government at the time, it would represent a major violation of citizens' privacy. Allegations of data mining first arose 2 weeks ago when whistleblower Christopher Wylie named TNT as a place where Cambridge Analytica assisted with election campaigning. But given the UNC meeting notes, the party could also be accused of breaching the Data Protection Act. Section 37 of that law states, quote, "Personal information under the custody or control of a public body shall not, without the consent of the individual to whom it relates, be used by the authority except for the purpose for which the information was obtained or compiled by the public body, or for a use consistent with that purpose." It could be argued that personal data submitted to public entities was not intended for campaigning. We attempted to put that question to opposition leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar, but she did not respond to our emails, text messages, or phone calls. We asked whether her party used confidential records to create a voters list, was information illegally obtained, and whether it was used to contact citizens during the 2015 general election. We put the same questions to the party's General Secretary, Dave Tanku, who is listed as an attendee at the 2014 meeting. He said he was convinced it was fake, as the alleged emails presented by Dr. Keith Rowley, which gave rise to Emailgate. We sent him a copy of the document via email. We attempted to reach all those named on the document. Then campaign manager Rodney Charles told us he could not recall such a meeting, but assured us he was not part of any action that involved the violation of privacy. Arun Ramnanan said he was out of the country but will seek legal counsel before making any comment. However, Roger Ramcharita confirmed he was at the meeting, and it was there, he says, he asked whether it was possible that by doing something like this they would be crossing a line or impinging on some type of law. He says he suggested legal advice should be gotten on this because it is a treacherous road. Ms. Khadija Amin could not recall such a meeting. We also sent her an email of the document.
Thank you very much, members of the media, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Those were the warning bells that were sounded in August 2015. This is the revelation and the confirmation of the role that Trinidad and Tobago played in a big global escapade, an invasion and a breach and an abuse of our privacy. There are many questions to be answered. This is extremely frightening, disturbing, and upsetting. But today, this government will pursue on behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago what needs to be pursued via criminal investigations and other investigations. I thank you all very much for your attention. I'll entertain a couple questions. Morning. We have not been able, we now meaning the Ministry of National Security, to unearth anything of that sort whatsoever. So what you had Mr. Wylie say is initially that was the topic of conversation, predictive behavior, predictive analysis for prediction of criminality and criminal acts. Doesn't exist. But we now know what they went on to do and the access they had and how they had the access to every individual citizen's browsing capabilities, etc.
I'm also trying to understand whether, really under what guise they approached SCL and Cambridge Analytica. Because if they collected this data, I'm curious to know whether the government ever had access to that data or whether it remains in the hands of SCL or Cambridge Analytica or just the UNC.
Those are the questions that need to be asked and the answers obtained with respect to it, because I am more than curious. I'm quite concerned. None of that happened from September 2015 come forward. None of that happens now under the Ministry of National Security under my tenure. All of this is pre-September 2015. My understanding is it may continue to be happening and the access, but it is not this government, it's not this administration. So those are the questions that need to be asked, and we need the answers to those questions.
Good day, sir. Shane Superville here. Those are some very serious allegations you revealed. Do you know, well, I know that you said that an investigation would be conducted as of today by the Attorney General as well as the police, but do you know prior to today if any police investigation has been done in relation to this?
Not as far as I'm aware in Trinidad and Tobago. The investigation, we're going to have two parallel investigations. I'm going to ask the Commissioner of Police and the police to launch a criminal investigation into this, but also the government will also assist. And one of the tools, it is a national security issue. This is an issue that concerns national security. This is a breach of every person's right to privacy, but worse than that, worse than your constitutional right. If you are being monitored to this extent and not being monitored by the state apparatus for legitimate reasons, and under the Interception of Communications Act, one of the reasons they state that persons can be intercepted is for national security. This has nothing to do with national security. So they say it is legal to intercept by those three officers the communication, if the communication is intercepted by an authorized officer in the interest of national security. This was not being done in the interest of national security. So now we will have an investigation from national security working with the Office of the Attorney General to find out. And we will be engaging, as the Attorney General already began to engage, international investigators such as the National Crime Agency in the United Kingdom, as well as the FBI in the United States, to see what assistance we can get there.
I know that you would have also not necessarily ruled out the possibility that the servers and the IP addresses of citizens may also be monitored to this day. What assurance, well, I know you would have given your own assurance that the ruling government at this time is not involved in that, but what really can people do to ensure that they're not being spied on anymore?
That is a question way beyond my capability and my capacity. I am not certain. What you do is you trust persons who are put into office, persons with power, persons with that ability not to abuse it. What we've heard very clearly is it was abused. You would have been following, like me, international news reports that when the President of the United States speaks to the incoming President of the Ukraine as a taped conversation. So I don't know what is safe. What we're doing is on a daily basis, counting on people not to abuse their position. But the question you've raised is one of concern to me. How was access given to telecommunication servers? Who gave that access to these individuals, to Cambridge Analytica, to SCL, to AIQ? Who gave them access to our telecommunication servers? And do they still have such access? Do other people have that access? We know it was the United National Congress and not even members of government, a party executive saying, Tanku, you go to TSTT, Ali, you go to WASA, Tanku, you go to TNTech and TT Post and Ministry of the People and Social Development, Arman, you go to GATE. Who gives these people the right to say, go and get this information? They are not government employees, they're not state personnel, they're not government ministers, but this is what they were doing. So now it's incumbent upon us to find out whether they still have that access, and we believe they may. So I can give no assurance, let me put it that way, and nor can I even advise at this stage. How do we know it's safe? I am no safer than you are.
Okay, this last question is a twofold question from me. One, what was the level of involvement, as far as you understand, of the then Ministry of National Security in this plot? And two, who was the Minister of National Security at the time?
A timeline needs to be done. I've read to you what I've read in the book. I am not certain as to what was the involvement of the Ministry of National Security, how it continued, what was the genesis, etc. I only know what Mr. Wylie has said. I have never spoken to Mr. Wylie. These are the questions that now need to be answered. What is the timeline? Who's in the chair? Who's in the seat? He doesn't say a Minister of National Security. His language is very careful there. He says Ministry of National Security. I can tell you as the current minister, there may be many things that could go on that the minister may not be aware of. So those are the questions to be investigated and the answers that need to be provided. But I found it very interesting that he did not say a Minister of National Security was engaged.
All right, I just have two more questions. You mentioned earlier that the Attorney General did announce that we wanted Mr. Wylie to come in to speak before JSC. Do we know when that's going to happen?
That has been something that has been being pursued for quite a while now. My understanding is that his attorneys wanted to protect him. He had some concerns as well. It is something that may continue to be pursued, but quite frankly, from what I have seen, what I've read, and my concerns, what I am looking at is something way beyond that. You know, now as I say, the launch of a criminal investigation, and we will have to, via an MLAT, through the Attorney General's office, seek the information from Mr. Wylie.
All right, if you can, I'd also like to understand the regional impact. Very often did Mr. Alexander Nix mention that they call us micronations, that they worked with a bunch of countries up the chain. They said very derogatory things about Bajan leaders. I'm wondering whether this investigation is going to encompass just us or whether other countries will now be involved as well.
At this stage, and this is the inception of the investigation, I am concerned about Trinidad and Tobago. If as we go along and when we're engaging international law enforcement, they begin to say there's a wider net, then at that stage is something that we may be able to explore with other regional leaders. I'm also going to leave here, or I'll have it circulated during the course of today. I'll have the comms group from National Security circulate a very disturbing article that I previously referred to by Paul Hilder, coming from, I think it's Open Democracy, on the 28th of January 2019. I didn't worry to refer to it here this morning, but the language in here and how Christopher Nix describes us Trinidadian and Tobagonians and the derogatory manner within which he refers to us and how they utilize a political campaign, basically using us as pawns, is very disturbing. I think every Trinidadian and Tobagonian should read this article to understand what it is that the UNC engaged persons, how they treated us, how they looked at us as individuals, and I say us, inclusive of me, because I find it very, very offensive. All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yes, there's just one last question from me. The last point you raised with the resurgence of a political leader and his collaboration with reputed criminal elements. Has that warranted the investigation of the police? Because I remember at another press conference earlier this year, you would have made the revelations that there were similar collaborations in the past. So from then to now, has that received any sort of attention from the police?
I am certain that the police are aware and they will carry out their own, well, it's not for me to investigate, they will carry out the investigations. I'm just putting on a marker as the relationship that has me very concerned. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your time.